While many serial killers have been executed for their crimes, plenty have managed to avoid the death penalty. You won't believe how many of them are living out their lives behind bars. Is there anything more paradoxical than a likable, self-aware serial killer? One of the best examples of this unlikely type of murderer is Edmund Kemper, who famed FBI profiler John Douglas claims to actually be fond of, at least on a conversational level. Speaking about an interview with Kemper in his book Journey into Darkness, he wrote, "I found Kemper to be bright, sensitive, and intuitive, and unlike most killers, he understands enough about himself to know that he shouldn't be let out."
I was really aware of the evil I was capable of. The murderous violence.
Kemper's journey to life imprisonment is a strange one. Raised by an abusive alcoholic mother, he was eventually sent to live with his grandparents at age 15. After killing them both with a rifle after an argument, he was incorrectly diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and spent 7 years at a Atascadero State Hospital before being released on parole on his 21st birthday. A few years later, he murdered 6 female students, most of them enrolled in college, which led to him being nicknamed the co-ed killer. His final 2 victims were his own mother and her best friend. Kemper himself has insisted that the first 6 victims were surrogates for his mother, the person who he believes set him on his murderous path by being continuously awful to him throughout his life. There was no chance of Kemper getting the death penalty since he was convicted during a time when the state of California had briefly done away with capital punishment, so he instead received 7 years to life for each murder. He was denied parole in 2007 and 2017, but will be up for it again in 2024. Paul Bernardo was first known as a Scarborough rapist, committing various sexual assaults between 1987 and 1990. Though he was suspected by police, he was never charged. Then, between 1990 and 1992, he and his then-wife Carla Homolka committed a series of rapes and murders that shocked the world and led to them being dubbed the Ken and Barbie killers. One of the victims was Carla's own younger sister, Tammy. They were finally caught in 1993. The trial was sensational, not just because of the crimes themselves, but also because Carla made a plea bargain with the prosecutors and testified against her husband in exchange for a manslaughter charge and only 12 years in prison. The press took to calling it the deal with the devil. Paul, on the other hand, was convicted on multiple charges, including 2 counts of first-degree murder, and sentenced to life in prison with an eligibility for parole in 25 years. Many people had wished for him to be executed.
Public hanging. String him up.
Should get rid of him. Kill him.
Kill him.
Initially, Bernardo was held at the Kingston Penitentiary. Over the course of the next 2 decades, he was considered a high-profile target and was assaulted multiple times, although records obtained by the CBC suggest he was never the aggressor. When the public found out that he was being transferred to a medium-security facility in 2023, scores of representatives from all levels of the Canadian government condemned the motion, leading Correctional Service Representative Ann Kelly to make a statement. She said, "The fact that he is at a medium-security institution does not negate the fact that he is a psychopath and that he committed horrific and unspeakable crimes. The punishment is the sentence, and he was given the harshest sentence possible in the Canadian justice system." He was denied parole in 2018 and again in 2021. Gary Ridgway, popularly known as the Green River Killer, is one of America's most prolific serial killers. Though he had been suspected since 1982, he wasn't arrested until 2001. As has been the case with numerous serial killers over the years, Ridgway was able to avoid the death penalty by agreeing to lead authorities to the locations of numerous bodies that had yet to be found. All told, he was convicted on 49 counts of aggravated first-degree murder and sentenced to 48 life sentences without the eligibility for parole, even though many wanted him to be put to death.
He's a waste of society and a waste of space. If I had one thing to ask you today, it would be kill him.
In 2020, the Washington State Supreme Court narrowly voted against legislation that would have allowed for the release of thousands of prisoners in an attempt to combat overcrowding and the spread of COVID, with Ridgway's name reported as one of those that fit the criteria for early release. It didn't happen, and Ridgway is still being held at the Washington State Penitentiary. And that wasn't the last time the 1980s and 90s era killer ended up in recent news headlines. In December of 2023, it was announced that a long unidentified set of remains attributed to Ridgway, known for decades only as Bones 17, was identified as Lori Ann Rozpatnik, who was 15 when she vanished in 1982. Then, a few weeks later, another set of remains, similarly known only as Bones 20, was identified as Tammy Lyles, a 16-year-old Seattle resident who was reported missing in 1983. When it comes to the royal court of serial killers, David Berkowitz has a seat at the main table. He dubbed himself the Son of Sam, writing taunting letters to police that included terrifying lines like, "When Father Sam gets drunk, he gets mean. He beats his family. Sometimes he ties me up to the back of the house. Other times he locks me in the garage. Sam loves to drive blood. Go out and kill, commands Father Sam. Berkowitz killed 6 people in the late 1970s, lighting New York City on fire with fear. His arrest, trial, and sentencing made for sensational headlines, much of it focusing on how he claimed that his neighbor's black dog, Sam, was a demon that had ordered him to carry out his murderous deeds. In June of 1978, he was given 25 years to life for each murder. He was 25 at the time and has since been held at New York's Shawangunk Correctional Facility. Like many, Berkowitz discovered religion behind bars and became an evangelical Christian.
I was just into a type of thinking which I believe that later on in life, Christ had completely set me free from.
He's also been taking a stand against something a tad unexpected, murderabilia, which is the sale of items related to violent crimes, such as a lock of Charles Manson's hair or John Wayne Gacy's clown paintings. He was inspired to take part after receiving a letter from crime victim advocate Andy Kahn in October of 2000, who had taken it upon himself to reach out to serial killers directly in an effort to see how they themselves felt about this weird form of exploitation. For more than 20 years, Berkowitz and Kahn have been working together to identify dealers soliciting materials from serial killers and end the shameless profiteering. There's no better example of just how deceiving appearances can be than Dennis Rader. No one, not even his immediate family, suspected that the devoted, church-going family man was the serial killer known as the BTK killer, BTK for bind, torture, kill. Born in 1945, Rader married in 1971, started killing in 1974, and continued off and on for years before being arrested in 2005 after sending a series of new letters to authorities. Rader pleaded guilty, was sentenced to 10 life sentences, and is still being held in the El Dorado Correctional Facility. Rader's daughter, Carrie Rawson, wrote 2 books about her experiences: A Serial Killer's Daughter, My Story of Faith, Love, and Overcoming, and Breaking Free, Overcoming the Trauma of My Serial Killer Father. In 2023, she visited her father to try to learn the details of his crimes in hopes of closing some of the unsolved cases that still remain. She told the New York Times, "I've always just wanted to help. I wanted access to the stuff when I could handle it, because I knew I could maybe learn more. There were those missing puzzle pieces." That interview came on the heels of an announcement that Rader's letters and drawings had given authorities the location of some of the trophies he had kept from his victims. Several others had recently come forward to claim that they were survivors of BTK. It's entirely possible that more cases might be solved. Some people get to know their coworkers just as well as their immediate family members. This was certainly the case with Amy Lochran and her fellow nurse Charles Cullen, or so Lochran thought. In 2003, the friendship came crashing down when law enforcement recruited Lochran to help catch Cullen, whom they suspected of murdering hospital patients, most often by poisoning them with a chemical called digoxin. Lochran wore a wire to trick Cullen into implicating himself in the murders. He didn't quite confess, but he said enough to warrant an arrest. Cullen was convicted 3 years later after being linked to 29 murders and suspected in as many as 400. He was sentenced to 18 consecutive life sentences and has since been serving his time at New Jersey State Prison. 16 years later, Lochran consulted on The Good Nurse, a movie adaptation of Cullen's murder spree and her effort to help police.
"You know you killed Kelly Anderson. We know you killed Anna Martinez. We know there's others."
In an interview with Glamour, Lochran admitted that she didn't want to have anything to do with it at first, but then she had a change of heart. She said, "Initially, I didn't want my name attached to it because I didn't want anyone to think I wanted to capitalize off of a serial killer story. Eventually, I realized it would give me a platform to explain myself and also give a voice to others who have loved dark people or have loved those with serious mental illness that led to dark acts." Randall Woodfield's descent into darkness can be traced all the way back to his high school years in Oregon, where he was arrested for indecent exposure. Though his criminal record was expunged after graduating, he was arrested for the same reason multiple times during his college years. All the while, he played as a wide receiver for the Portland State Vikings and was even part of a campus Bible group. After dropping out with only a few semesters left before graduation, he was drafted by the Green Bay Packers in 1974. However, Woodfield was ultimately cut from the team before getting a chance to play. It was after this period that he moved beyond petty crimes and began to earn his infamy. In 1975, he was arrested on robbery charges and sentenced to 10 years in prison, but only ended up serving 4 before being released on parole. It was after his early release that he committed the murders, robberies, and sexual assaults that led to him being called the I-5 killer. He wasn't caught until March of 1981. In June of the same year, he was convicted on murder charges and given life in prison plus 90 years, with a few more decades tacked on when more charges later came to light. For his part, Woodfield has never confessed to any of the murders that he was charged with. He's currently being held at the Oregon State Penitentiary, and it's unlikely he'll ever have a chance at parole, especially considering they already made that mistake once before. Robert Lee Yates, a military veteran and married father of 5, seemed to have a perfectly normal life in Spokane, Washington. Or so everyone who knew him thought. This perception was shattered when he was arrested in 2000 for the murder of a sex worker named Jennifer Joseph. Yates had been actively killing between 1975 and 1998, and DNA evidence ultimately linked him to the deaths of 12 other women. He was convicted on 13 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted first-degree murder. He pleaded guilty on the condition that he wouldn't be given the death penalty and was instead sentenced to 408 years in prison. However, Yates was actually sentenced to death by lethal injection in 2002 after being charged for the murders of 2 additional victims. He fought this sentence for years with appeals and petitions and was ultimately saved from death in 2018 when the state declared the death penalty unconstitutional. He's currently being held at the Washington State Penitentiary. Though he escaped capital punishment, he will never be up for parole.